The sound was wrong. It wasn't the gentle tap of a delivery driver or the friendly rhythm of a neighbor. This was a hard, impatient fist against my front door, each knock a small explosion in the dead quiet of 2 o'clock in the morning. I was awake, of course. My work-from-home life had turned my schedule inside out, and, honestly, the blue light of my laptop was my most constant companion. I lived alone in a neighborhood so quiet you could hear a cat's footsteps on the pavement outside. The silence was a comfort, a thick blanket I wrapped around myself. Tonight, that blanket had been ripped away by 3 sharp, demanding knocks. My heart began a frantic, panicked beat against my ribs, a trapped bird trying to escape. Who would be at my door at this hour? My mind raced through a list of terrible possibilities. A family emergency? A fire? A mistake? I crept from my desk, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. The world outside my windows was a sea of black ink, broken only by the pale, yellow glow of a distant street lamp. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of calm, suddenly felt exposed and vulnerable. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist into something monstrous. The silence that followed the knocking was somehow worse than the sound itself. I stood frozen in the middle of my living room, listening. My breath was a small, shaky thing in my throat. I willed them to go away, to decide they had the wrong house, the wrong person. Maybe it was just a prank, some teenagers with nothing better to do. But the knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. It was a sound that didn't ask for entry. It demanded it. There was an authority in it that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. This wasn't a joke. This was something else entirely, something that had crawled out of the dark to find my specific door. I tiptoed to the peephole, my hand trembling as I lifted the small metal cover. Through the distorted fisheye lens, I saw them. 2 men, standing stiffly on my welcome mat. They were dressed in dark blue uniforms, the kind that immediately signals law and order. One was tall and thin, with a face full of sharp angles. The other was shorter, broader, with a thick neck and a serious expression. They looked official. They looked real. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, under the weak glow of my porch light, they also looked like figures from a nightmare. My fear didn't lessen, it just changed shape. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper. I tried to make it sound stronger, less like the frightened person I was. The wood of the door felt thin and useless, a flimsy barrier against whatever was on the other side. My apartment was on the ground floor of a small, quiet building. My neighbors were all asleep, lost in their own dreams. There was no one to hear me, no one to help if things went wrong. The sense of isolation was crushing, a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I was completely and utterly alone with the 2 men outside my door. The taller one spoke, his voice muffled but clear. "Police, ma'am. We've had a report of a disturbance coming from this apartment." His words were calm and professional, but they made no sense. A disturbance? I'd been sitting at my laptop for hours, the only sound the soft click of my keyboard. The television was off. The radio was silent. The only disturbance in this apartment was the frantic drumming of my own heart. The quiet was the one thing I could always count on here, the very signature of my solitary life. I pressed my face closer to the peephole, trying to see more. They had police hats on, and I could just make out the glint of a badge on the shorter man's chest. Everything about them screamed official, but a knot of unease was tightening in my stomach. Why wouldn't they use the intercom at the building's main entrance? Why come directly to my door? A disturbance. "I think you have the wrong apartment," I told them, hoping my words would be enough to send them away. I wanted them to leave, to melt back into the night they came from and let me lock my fear away. "We need to come in and take a look, ma'am," the shorter one said. His voice was deeper, rougher. "It's just standard procedure. The sooner we check things out, the sooner we can be on our way and you can get back to bed." He sounded reasonable. He sounded like a police officer. My mind was at war with itself. My fear told me to keep the door locked, to call 911, to scream, but my rational side told me not to be difficult. These were the police. "You let them in. You cooperate." Hesitantly, my hand moved toward the deadbolt. The moment I turned the lock, I knew I had made a mistake. The click of the deadbolt sliding back was the loudest sound in the world, a final, irreversible decision. I opened the door just a crack, but the taller officer pushed it open the rest of the way and stepped inside. He didn't wait for an invitation. He just entered, his large frame immediately making my small entryway feel crowded and tight. The shorter one followed right behind him, his eyes scanning the room with an intensity that felt less like a professional assessment and more like a predator sizing up its territory. They brought the cold night air in with them, a damp chill that clung to their dark uniforms and seemed to seep into the walls. "Thank you, ma'am," the tall one said. But his tone was flat, empty of any real gratitude. He looked around my living room, his gaze lingering on my laptop, my bookshelf, the half-empty mug of tea on my coffee table. It wasn't the quick, efficient scan of a professional, it felt personal, invasive. He was not just seeing my things, he was judging them, cataloging them, and by extension, me. The shorter one walked past me without a word and began to move through my apartment. He didn't ask for permission to search, he just did it. He went into the kitchen first. I heard him open the refrigerator, the soft hum momentarily interrupted. Then he opened a cupboard, then another. The small, ordinary sounds of my home were being made by a stranger, and it felt like a violation. I stood frozen by the door, watching the tall one, who had not moved. He just stood there, watching me. His stillness was more unnerving than his partner's movements. "What kind of disturbance was reported?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. The tall officer finally looked at me, his eyes dark and hard to read. "Loud noises, shouting," he said simply. It was a lie, and we both knew it. My apartment was a tomb of silence. His partner returned from the kitchen and walked toward my bedroom. I wanted to tell him to stop, to get out, but the words wouldn't form. Fear had stolen my voice. I was a guest in my own home, a powerless observer, while these men took control. The shorter officer disappeared into my bedroom. I heard the scrape of my closet door sliding open, then the soft thud of drawers being pulled out and pushed back in. He was going through my personal space, through the places where I kept my life folded and stored away. It felt deeply wrong, a boundary crossed that could never be uncrossed. What were they looking for? If they were investigating a noise complaint, why were they searching my closets? The logic didn't add up, and the gap between what they said and what they did was growing wider and more terrifying. The tall officer remained in the living room with me, a silent guard. He finally moved, walking over to my desk. He picked up a framed photo of my parents. "Nice family," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. He put it down, and then his eyes landed on me. "You live here all alone?" he asked. The question was too personal, too pointed. It wasn't about a disturbance. It was about me. It was about my vulnerability. I just nodded, unable to speak. His stare was heavy, and I felt a cold shiver travel down my spine, a primal warning that something was terribly wrong. His partner came back from the bedroom. He had found nothing, of course. He shrugged at the tall one, then he did something truly bizarre. He pulled out a small, old-fashioned digital camera from his pocket. It wasn't a police-issue device. It looked like something you'd buy at a cheap electronics store. "We need to take a photo for the report," he said. "Procedure." Before I could protest, he raised the camera and a bright flash illuminated the room, blinding me for a second. The click of the shutter echoed in the silence. He had taken my picture. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Why would they need my picture? What kind of report required a personal photograph of the resident? The whole situation felt like a scene from a movie. A bad dream I couldn't wake up from. The official, procedural mask they wore was slipping, revealing something ugly and menacing underneath. The tall officer looked at his partner, then back at me. "All right," he said. "We're done here. Don't let it happen again." He turned and walked out the door, the shorter one following him without another word. As soon as the door closed behind them, I lunged for the deadbolt, my fingers fumbling with the lock. I twisted it, then secured the chain, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, just trying to calm the wild storm inside me. The apartment felt tainted, their presence lingering in the air like a bad smell. I replayed the entire encounter in my mind, and, honestly, every detail seemed sharper and more sinister in the aftermath. Their questions hadn't been questions at all, they had been data collection. "You live here all alone?" The tall officer's words echoed in my head. It wasn't a question born of curiosity. It was a statement of fact they were confirming. They wanted to know if I was isolated, if there was anyone else who might have witnessed their visit. They were assessing my weakness, my suitability for what? I didn't want to complete the thought. I walked through my apartment, touching the things they had touched, feeling a sense of contamination. The handle of the refrigerator, the drawers in my bedroom, the frame of my parents' photo. Their behavior was all wrong for police officers. There was no paperwork, no badge numbers offered, no official car parked outside with flashing lights. I had looked out the window after they left, and the street was as empty and dark as it had been before. They had simply appeared out of the shadows and vanished back into them. Real police officers followed a protocol, a set of rules designed to ensure public trust. These men had followed no rules but their own. They had moved with a quiet confidence that came not from authority, but from knowing they would not be challenged. The photograph was the most disturbing part. Why take my picture? For what report? It felt like they were taking a trophy, a souvenir of their visit. Or worse, it was for identification, a way to mark me. The flash of the camera replayed in my mind, a sudden, blinding violation. I felt exposed, seen in a way I had never wanted to be seen. They had not just invaded my home, they had captured my image, stolen a part of me. The unease I had felt during their visit was now curdling into a deep, chilling dread. The rest of the night was sleepless. I sat on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, but I couldn't get warm. The cold they had brought into the apartment had settled deep into my bones. Every creak of the building, every rustle of leaves outside my window, sent a fresh jolt of panic through me. I kept staring at the front door, half expecting another knock, half expecting them to come back. The lock and chain that had once made me feel so secure now seemed like fragile toys, easily broken. My home, my sanctuary had been transformed into a place of fear. I thought about their faces, trying to burn their features into my memory. The tall one's sharp, angular face, the shorter one's thick neck and blank eyes. But the details were already starting to blur, replaced by the overwhelming sense of menace they had projected. They had been so calm, so controlled. That was what made it so terrifying. Their actions were aggressive and invasive, but their demeanor was chillingly matter-of-fact, as if this was just a normal part of their job. What kind of job was it? As the first gray light of dawn began to creep through my windows, I felt a desperate need for answers. The story they'd given me, the noise complaint, was a lie. So why were they here? Was it a random act of intimidation? Or was it something more targeted, more personal? I tried to think of anyone who might wish me harm, but my life was small and quiet. I worked from home as a freelance editor. I had no enemies, no dramatic conflicts. My circle was small. The randomness of the event was almost as scary as the event itself. By morning, I was exhausted but wired, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. The sun was up, painting the world in normal, cheerful colors, but the darkness of the night still clung to me. The encounter felt dreamlike, surreal, but the fear was very real. I knew I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. The feeling of being watched, of being targeted, was too strong to ignore. I had to know if they were real. I had to know if the badge and the uniforms were legitimate. I needed the real police to tell me what was going on. My hand was shaking so much I could barely dial the number. I found the non-emergency line for the local police department online and took a deep breath before calling. When a calm, professional voice answered, "City Police, how can I help you?" A small wave of relief washed over me. This was real. This was order. This was the opposite of the cold, predatory calm of the men from last night. I explained what had happened, my voice trembling as I recounted the late-night knock, the story of the disturbance, the search of my apartment. The dispatcher listened patiently, asking clarifying questions. "What time did you say this was, ma'am?" 2 o'clock this morning, I replied, and they said they were responding to a noise complaint at your address. "Yes," I said, my hope starting to fade with each question she asked. I could hear her typing in the background, the soft clicks a stark contrast to the pounding in my chest. I waited, holding my breath. I wanted her to say it was a new procedure, a special unit, anything that would make it make sense. Then she spoke, and her words made the blood run cold in my veins. "Ma'am, I've checked our dispatch logs for the entire night. We had no calls for a disturbance on your street. We did not send any officers to your address at any point last night. The silence that followed her statement was deafening. My entire body went numb. They weren't police. The uniforms were a costume. The badges were fake. The authority was a lie. It was all a performance, a terrifying act designed to get them through my door. The dispatcher's voice turned more urgent. "Ma'am, are you safe right now? We need to send a real patrol car over immediately." I mumbled a yes, but my mind was spinning. If they weren't cops, then who were they, and what did they want? The entire encounter replayed in my mind, but now every detail was coated in a thick layer of horror. Their questions about me living alone, their search of my private spaces, the photograph. It wasn't a police visit, it was a home invasion, carried out with horrifying precision and psychological terror. The real police were on their way, but it felt too late. The damage was already done. While I waited for the real police to arrive, I opened my laptop, my hands moving on autopilot. I needed a distraction, something to pull my mind away from the terrifying reality that two criminals had been in my home. I clicked open my email, intending to lose myself in work. That's when I saw it. An email from an address that was just a jumble of random letters and numbers. The subject line was a single chilling word: soon. My heart stopped. I knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that it was from them. With a trembling finger, I clicked the email open. There was no text, just an attachment, a single image file. It was the photo the shorter man had taken. It was me, standing in my living room, my face pale and my eyes wide with fear, illuminated by the harsh, invasive flash of the camera. Seeing it felt like being violated all over again. They had my image, they had my fear captured in a digital file, and they had sent it to me as a promise, a threat of what was to come. Beneath the photo was a simple typed message: "We know you're alone." I stared at the picture, my terror so complete it felt like I was suffocating. I wanted to close the laptop, to throw it against the wall, but I couldn't look away. My eyes scanned the photo, taking in the details of my own terrified face, the familiar background of my living room. And then I saw it. Something was wrong with the photo. In the deep shadow of the hallway leading to my bedroom, just behind my shoulder in the picture, there was a shape. It was dark and indistinct, but it was unmistakably human. It was the faint outline of a third person. A figure, standing silently in the darkness of my own apartment, watching the entire scene unfold. They had not been two men. There had been three. One of them had already been inside my home, hidden in the shadows, waiting. They hadn't just broken in last night, someone had been here all along. The knock on the door, the fake police, the search, it was all a distraction, a horrifying piece of theater. And I was the star of a show I never knew had started. The police sirens grew closer, but the sound offered no comfort. The danger wasn't outside anymore, it had been inside all along.